in our drive to have no central authority, and at Dash we also want and have no central authority, but is it desirable that there be no authority whatsoever? Can there not be decentralized authority, that is, authority granted based upon consensus of a completely decentralized network?
It's been 115 years since investors had an opportunity like this. The Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, and Henry Ford made a fortune from the last energy-powered vehicle revolution. Let's seize the moment in the hottest sector in the world right now. Visit crushthestreet.com/win.
Hello everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I'm joined today with a Bitcoin expert, digital currency expert, Amanda Johnson, host of Dash Details, airs every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern, and she's just a digital currency expert. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about digital currency here, specifically Bitcoin at Crush the Street, but we're going to get Amanda's comments on it and also some comments on Dash, another alternative currency, alternative digital currency. But first of all, Amanda, thanks for coming on the show with me today.
Thanks for having me, Kenneth.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, Bitcoin is very hot right now. You know, it was over $1,000 US dollars not that long ago. It's at around the $900 range at the moment. Please give us the current situation, the current environment, and your thoughts on Bitcoin as a whole.
Sure, I would be happy to. So as I discussed recently in a lecture that I gave at the University of New Mexico, it's my belief that the Bitcoin price is currently in a bubble. And I can't speculate on where in the bubble that might be, as in, is it the beginning of a bubble, meaning it may go substantially higher before popping, or is it at the very end? I don't know. But what's important is the reason for that. Why would I say that? And what's more, Kenneth, why do I work for Dash and not for Bitcoin? So to me, the primary problem that is set to be probably the undoing of Bitcoin is, let me lay a bit of foundation before I even get into that, because this is all very strange and new technology, and it behooves us to have a grasp of what's going on the network level to then understand, that's how such and such a thing could be a problem. So in a cryptocurrency network, we are offering a product, just like any other business is offering a product. With cryptocurrency in particular, we're practically offering ourselves as bookkeepers. It's our primary job to keep a ledger, also called a blockchain, but a ledger of currency transfers, token transfers, if you will. And so we're basically a bookkeeping service, but we differ substantially from a traditional bookkeeping service in that we are a network of people connected through the internet who have no idea who our coworkers are. We will probably never meet our coworkers. We certainly don't know their email addresses or their phone numbers, much less their names. So in a situation like this, the question then becomes, how do we offer a product, and namely, how do we ever make changes or improvements or upgrades to our product when we have no idea who we're working with? And the only way that we can ever make upgrades to our product is to come into agreement with all of these people who we don't know. In cryptocurrency, the term for that is consensus. So the only way that we can offer a product, make sure it's the same product that we're all running on our computer as we offer it, and the only way we can ever make improvements to it is to come into consensus with all of these people we don't even know. Now, that is a problem that simply requires a solution. And unfortunately, Bitcoin never created that solution. And so we're seeing the fruits of that at this time, Kenneth. And the fruits of that have manifested in particular in Bitcoin in a crippling cap on their network's capacity to process transactions, basically to be bookkeepers. And because they lack this consensus mechanism, they're currently maxed out at somewhere between 3 and 7 transactions per second, when they have the capability to process potentially an unlimited number of transactions per second. But without the mechanism to come to consensus, their network won't change. The Bitcoin network has run essentially more or less the same software today as they were when Bitcoin was invented 8 years ago. There's been almost no end user improvements on their network whatsoever. And so it's set to remain that way indefinitely, Kenneth. And if Bitcoin were the only game in town, if there were zero competition in cryptocurrency, maybe I would feel less bearish on their future, but they're absolutely not the only game in town. And so it's my belief that Dash is moving in the direction to eventually usurp Bitcoin's market cap and then move past it.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's a serious allegation right there, that it could do that. I mean, Bitcoin is just top dog, but that's interesting. So how big of a problem is this max, ability to process transactions? How big of an issue is that for Bitcoin? Is it, something that could really get in the way of future growth? I know you're saying that, but I mean, is it really as big of a deal as you're saying?
Let me give you an example of a couple headlines that I read on the internet only yesterday, Kenneth. A site called CryptoCoinsNews.com published a headline yesterday that reported that $250 million was sitting in the unprocessed transaction pool on Bitcoin. These were transactions that were sent by people who were expecting their transactions to be processed by Bitcoin's bookkeepers in a timely manner. And mind you, in Bitcoin, a timely manner at best is within 10 minutes. And these transactions were sitting there for 1, 2, 3, 10, even more than 15 hours. And a few hours later, the head of the gold selling company, Vaultoro, and Vaultoro has been they might even be a Bitcoin-only business now that I think about it. The head of Vaultoro is making a post on Reddit he's saying, what have I done? What have I done in becoming a Bitcoin-only business? Because this limited processing capacity has meant that fees are going higher and higher and higher. People wanting to send transactions have to basically attempt to outbid one another in the fees that they pay, because the transactions with the highest fees attached to them will be processed first. So you have people paying 30, 40, 50 cents on a transaction, sometimes more than $1 or $2 even if it's a large transaction. And the Bitcoin fees have roughly doubled every year for the past 3 years. And this trend shows no sign of stopping, because it's more and more transactions bidding for the same amount, the static amount of space per 10 minutes. And so it's not at all a small deal. And I think for those who maybe don't realize the growing problem that it is, it's probably because they don't do on-chain Bitcoin transactions very often. What I mean by that is, for example, if they hold Bitcoin on an exchange, or if they hold Bitcoin in a Coinbase account, these services, when they send, I wish you could see my air quotes here, when they quote unquote send a Bitcoin from one place to another, they're not actually doing that on the Bitcoin ledger itself. So there aren't these wait times. There aren't these high fees because it's not actually a transaction. It's their own personal books. And so my thought as to why this is not something that you've heard about more, Kenneth, is that most people who own Bitcoin aren't attempting to transact with it as a currency, because if they were, they would know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, that's interesting. And you know what? Bitcoin, for the average person, most people don't understand it. And most people, I don't know how long it would take for people to really gain widespread conventional wisdom and really understand it. But if Bitcoin did have a serious fallout and a serious flaw, I'd be concerned that it would take down the perception and the public positive opinion of the entire digital currency sector. Is this something you consider a problem for all digital currencies if Bitcoin loses its status and people become very skeptical of it?
Kenneth, that's a real possibility, and it's something I don't think any of us want to see. Even those of us who work for competitors of Bitcoin, such as myself working for Dash, none of us like seeing Bitcoin do poorly and disappoint people. Because as you said, Bitcoin is currently the top dog. It is currently the face of cryptocurrency. And so we at Dash have decided that it's time for us to attempt to reach beyond the cryptosphere. I call it the cryptosphere, which is basically the roughly $18 billion worth of capital that owns any of these many cryptocurrencies. We have a roadmap to this year offer a product that we believe will not even feel or look like cryptocurrency. And because it will not feel or look like cryptocurrency, we think we have a shot at being the first cryptocurrency that is used by the average person. And that would allow us to leave this cryptosphere, which still feels so speculative and so not useful for everyday use cases like what we think a cryptocurrency actually can be. We don't want to be something that's just day traded by nerds on exchanges. We want to blow past that and get onto the smartphones that are sitting in the back pockets of everyday people who just want to use a payment app that feels as nice and easy as a PayPal or a Venmo.
Sure. Well, I mean, you talked about Dash overtaking Bitcoin over time, and that's a big statement considering how big Bitcoin is compared to all the different alternative currencies. So, talk to us a little more about the details on Dash and what makes it better than, Bitcoin and presumably the other digital currencies that are out there.
Sure, I'm happy to. So, first and foremost, we are able, and we're the only top cryptocurrency that is able to offer what's called an instant confirmation. Now, a confirmation on a cryptocurrency network is basically the stamp that the network gives to a payment to say, this payment is now irreversible. There is no amount of tomfoolery that anyone can engage in that will reverse this payment and snatch it out of the merchant's hands, basically. We are the only network that's able to offer one of those stamps immediately at the point of sale. And that alone, within I don't know how many years it would take, Kenneth, but that feature alone actually makes us the only cryptocurrency that's suitable for point of sale buying a coffee, for buying a hot dog, for buying a pair of shoes. Because think about a credit card. when Bitcoin and some of these other cryptocurrencies first came out, one of their main bragging points was, we settle faster than a credit card. We settle faster than a credit card. And that's true. They settle faster than a credit card because they settle on a good day within 10 minutes. But a settlement is different from an authorization. An authorization is something that a credit card does give almost instantaneously. And so no cryptocurrency can seriously think that it can compete with legacy payment systems if it doesn't authorize instantly, giving the merchant confidence that, yes, you will get this payment. It will not be snatched back away from you. And Dash is the only one that can do that. Secondly, Dash is the only top cryptocurrency that offers privacy if you want it. You can make transparent payments on our network, a la Bitcoin. That is to say, the payment is traceable so that you would have something like a receipt, if you wanted it, to prove that you made that transaction. But the flip side of that is that many or most of us want privacy of at least some of our finances some of the time. And so we also offer the option that if you want your transactions to be private, they can. Thirdly, we are also the only top cryptocurrency which has a treasury, which is to say we set aside some of our newly created coins so that we can hire people to work for us. And this allows us to remain independent, to be self-sustainable, whereas so many other networks find themselves reaching out for grants or reaching out for donations from deep-pocketed interested parties. And the problem with that is that it leaves the door wide open for conflicts of interest and arguments over whose money is accepted and whose isn't. And so our having a treasury allows us to employ ourselves and to remain independent in all of our development decisions. And then finally, as I had mentioned to you earlier, Kenneth, we're the only cryptocurrency that I know of that is actively developing an app that will look and feel like Venmo, so that you don't have to explain cryptocurrency and how it works for someone to be able to use Dash. They'll just be able to download the app and they don't even ever need to hear the word blockchain if they don't want to.
Yeah, it goes along with people driving cars, but not necessarily knowing how the internal combustion engine works. It doesn't really matter. People know how to drive a car and they move on. They don't care. Cars are widely used. So I can definitely see that happening. And because I'm not too familiar with it, explain, one of the things people like about Bitcoin is that it's decentralized and, no one controls Bitcoin. But you started talking about Dash and the company controlling. Is there some security that people can have in that Dash isn't controlled per se by a central authority, and that basically shenanigans can't be imposed on them behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to me, what the question here is as you say, a lot of people find attractive about Bitcoin. They say there's no central authority. And the same is true of Dash. But we have to ask ourselves, is it desirable that in our drive to have no central authority, and at Dash we also want and have no central authority, but is it desirable that there be no authority whatsoever? Can there not be decentralized authority, that is, authority granted based upon consensus of a completely decentralized network? And so we like to think that at Dash, we have the best of both worlds in that our network is completely decentralized. If you look up a map of where our nodes are around the world, you'll see they're scattered across the face of the entire world. But is it not better if through a decentralized vote, we can grant authority to the best employee for the job? And not so much authority in that these people that we hire to develop our coins. Not that they could ever push anything on us that we don't want. We're still cryptocurrency. We still decide what software we run. And if one of the developers that we hire pushes out software that we don't like, we choose not to upgrade to it. And what's more, we vote down their salary that's coming out of our treasury. In effect, we fire them. So because we can vote as a decentralized network, we have the ability to hire and fire employees as we see fit. Just like a regular company can, right? I mean, that's a regular ability to have. And so it's really nice because, yes, we can have those developers that we look to who push out the code that we want them to push and who are completely public. I mean, if you go to any cryptocurrency conference, you're going to see Evan Duffield, lead developer of Dash. He is well known. We all know his face. We all know that he lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And you will also see Ryan Taylor, director of finance at Dash. We all know his face, and he happens to live in Phoenix, Arizona as well. And so there are well-known faces, and you could say that they have a level of authority within Dash because they've proven how good their work is over the years. But as the network, as the decentralized network, we can fire them at absolutely any time. So we really have the best of both worlds. That is, we don't have a lack of authority, but the authority is conditional, and it's only granted by a decentralized vote.
Wow. Well, I know that's really interesting too, and it's a great point as to what makes Dash different and presumably better in that sense. Can you give us some of the specs on it? What's Dash currently trading at? Also, how many coins outstanding will there be? How long will it take to do all the mining of the coins, and just some of the details that are more known for Bitcoin?
Sure, happy to, Kenneth. So when we stop producing coins, that is when we reach the eventual coin cap, which will take place in roughly 100 years, our inflation rate will go to absolute zero, though it will go to near zero sooner than that. We'll have roughly 18 to 19 million Dash. The reason that number cannot be known exactly is because every month when our treasury creates coins to pay our employees, we don't always have to create, there's a maximum on the treasury is basically what I'm saying. But sometimes if we don't have expenses that month that would max out the treasury, we create fewer coins than the maximum that we could create. So that's the reason that we don't know whether it will be 18 or 19 million or something near there in the end, because we don't know exactly what our expenses will be each month, but we know that it won't be more than 19 million coins, because that's been calculated for how many Dash would exist if we maxed out our treasury every month. So at current time, there are a little over 7 million Dash. So we're just under 50% of the way to how many Dash will ever exist totally. We're trading at between 14 and 15 US dollars per coin. So that gives us roughly a $100 million market cap. Our block times, for anybody who knows what that is the frequency with which we publish a completed update to our ledger is roughly every 2.5 minutes. Though, as I had mentioned to you before, Kenneth, we can offer instant confirmations. So we can offer that payment authorization, so to speak, even regardless of the fact that our blocks come out every 2.5 minutes. Our mining algorithm or hashing algorithm is called X11. And some have asked, as you did in an email earlier, Kenneth, why did we choose X11 instead of Bitcoin's SHA-256? And the reason we did that, it was so that we've existed for 3 years. And for the first 2 years that we existed, there was no specialized computers, they're called ASICs. There were no ASICs yet developed for X11. So that allowed the network to grow from a very ground level, meaning anybody could mine just with their home computer, their home laptop. anybody could mine with those kinds of computers. And it was only last summer, the summer of 2016, that the first ASICs were developed for X11. And since then, since people have begun buying those ASICs, our hash rate has gone up on basically a hockey stick curve on the charts. And so to hear Evan Duffield talk about it, I can really see the design decision why, which is to say, in the beginning, it was nice not to use Bitcoin SHA-256, because if we had anybody who was currently mining for Bitcoin could have just pointed their ASICs right to Dash, and they would have shot the hash rate through the ceiling before a ground level organic growth could have taken place in Dash, and he didn't want that. But now that professional hardware has been developed, we are orders of magnitude more secure than we were even just a year ago. And so that's how our mining works.
Wow. Well, a lot of this stuff is, I will admit, over my head. And I rely on people like you who are smart and understand it and say, hey, this is the way of the future. And you know what? I appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing this information with us. If people want to learn more about Dash and more about you, where would they go, and what would they find, and how can they be involved in Dash and purchase it and have it and transact with it if they wanted to?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kenneth. So the first resource I would point them to, for your audience in particular, Kenneth, that I think they would appreciate, is a presentation that our Director of Finance, Ryan Taylor, gave at the Northern was less than ideal. So I remade his presentation into a video that I published 4 days ago. It's called "Why Aren't We Seeing Greater Adoption of Cryptocurrency?" It's on YouTube, and I'm going to send you that link as soon as we're off this call, Kenneth, because that will give you a very good idea of both where we've come from and our roadmap for 2017 in terms of how do we have the hubris to think that we can actually break out of this speculative crypto space and actually reach the average person. So in addition to watching that video, which is about 15 minutes, I would also invite your listeners to check out my weekly YouTube series of me talking about developments in Dash. We publish every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time at youtube.com/Dash.org. The show is called Dash Detailed.
Amanda Johnson, everybody. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. I really do appreciate it, and it was a pleasure speaking with you.
And it was with you, Kenneth. Thank you.